Subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you, bye. This case takes place in Singapore in the year 2005. A young ambitious woman disappeared without a trace, only for her remains to surface in a river, cut into pieces just days later. As the police closed in on this investigation, a disturbing story unfolded. Meet Liu Hong Mei. Liu was born in the city of Changchun on the 14th of September 1982. Liu was the third child of 4. Little is known about her early life or her parents and siblings. What is certain is that she had one brother and one sister, and that Liu was very close to her sister. Liu's sister decided to move to Singapore in 2003 to marry a Singaporean man. At this time, she was left with a potentially life-altering decision. Does she stay with her family in Changchun or follow her beloved sister to Singapore? Liu was only around 20 years old at the time, and she decided to go with her sister. Now, depending on the location and the size of the property, rent in Singapore was up to 20 times higher than her own city, so Liu needed a job fast to survive independently. However, she had never attended college or university, so this did limit her to less skilled work. Although, it didn't take long for Liu to secure a well-paying job in manufacturing, and by all accounts she was doing very well for herself. By 2005, Liu had been living in Singapore for nearly 2 years. She had a vibrant social life, mostly centered around her close sister. She worked incredibly hard, earning 2 promotions and pay rises in a short period of time. She managed to save the equivalent of a few $1,000s. And she spent this money on night classes to master the English language, as she intended to study in a local polytechnic to get a diploma in tourism. And to top it all off, she was given the role of maid of honour at her sister's wedding. Life was good, but tragically, she never made it to her sister's wedding, and nothing was as it seemed. At her place of work, she became well acquainted with the night shift production manager, a 50-year-old Singaporean man named Leong Suk Chaw. He lived with his wife and 2 of their 3 children, as one of his older children was living in a hostel at the time. According to his family, friends, neighbours and colleagues, he was a loving husband and a loving father. He was known to be very gentle, calming and non-violent, although this image shatters when you see the brutality of what he was soon capable of. Now, despite being married, he became fixated on Liu, and Liu reciprocated his advances. Their relationship was a secret love affair that started on the factory shop floor and then led into hotel bedrooms. On the 13th of June 2005, the couple met at their usual spot, Hotel 81 Gold in Galang. After having their way with each other, Liu decided to take a shower. So Leong decided to go through Liu's bag for a comb to comb his hair when he stumbled across her bank card. Despite Leong earning a good wage, he decided that he was going to steal her bank card and ultimately steal her money. At some point, he discovered her PIN number and knew she was saving for her education. She trusted him as any lover would, so the fact he knew this information is no surprise. The couple left the hotel at 3 p.m, and by 5 p.m, Leong had put on a baseball cap and cycled to numerous ATMs across the city. In total, he deceitfully stole over $2,000 of Liu's life savings. He even spent $71 in a supermarket for groceries. But little did he know, he was caught on camera. Liu soon discovered that her card was missing once she had left Leong, and then she became distraught when she realized that a large sum of money had been taken out of her account. Thankfully, however, Liu was able to retrieve the CCTV footage from these various ATMs, and the police were going to look over this footage the following day. And so she made a call to Leong, telling him that money had been stolen from her account, but not to worry, as the culprit would soon be caught. But this was not good for Leong. If Leong was identified by the police or Liu, his world would come crumbling down around him. He would be branded as a thief, and his wife and children would know about his affair. Not only this, he would likely lose his job and Liu. He would literally lose everything, and he had no one else to blame but himself. Because of this relatively trivial crime, he felt that he had to go to the extreme measures to cover up his ill actions, and believe me, they were very extreme. When Liu told Leong about the stolen money and the impending investigation, he decided to invite her round over to his flat. His wife and eldest daughter were on holiday, and his son was attending university. At home, it was just him and his youngest daughter who was at school. Liu must have felt very privileged to be invited round to his house for the very first time. But this was no privilege. This was a murderous trap. There is little information with regard to how the following events took place, but I will continue with the leading theory which emerged after the investigation and trial. She arrived at his home between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m, and they talked until 11 a.m. The couple didn't undertake their usual activities, as later evidence showed no sexual activity occurred. As the two continued to talk, Liu was distracted, and so Leong picked up a bathroom towel. He advanced towards her slowly. She watched him approach, expecting the warmth of his loving embrace, but instead she felt the whip of a towel swiftly wrapping around her neck. Her lover was now a cold-blooded killer. As the towel tightened and strangled her, it cut off oxygen to her brain, and soon enough she started turning blue. Leong stared into her eyes as he maintained his compression. Eventually, the oxygen levels in her brain reached critically low levels, and she fell unconscious. But Leong's intentions were not to knock her out, they were to kill her. He held this position, pulling harder and harder, before eventually releasing his grip. But this was only the start. His youngest daughter would soon return home from school, and he had to go to work at 7 p.m, so he needed to dispose of the body, and he had little time. Leong took her body into his bathroom near the kitchen, and brought with him a butcher's cleaver and a rubber mallet. Leong began carefully placing the cleaver over the soft connective tissue at the joints of the legs. Once the cleaver was in place, he would bash the rear of the cleaver with the rubber mallet. He cut through her flesh with incredibly clean and precise cuts. Leong made several more cuts, dismembering her upper torso, lower torso, legs and feet, before moving on to the head. He placed the cleaver at her neck and severed her head. Leong then proceeded to wrap up her bloodied chopped up remains in a newspaper, and then into green plastic bags, and then into cardboard boxes. He then loaded up his son's bicycle with these boxes, and made his way around Singapore disposing of them in different parts of the Klang River. When he arrived back home before his shift at work, he scrubbed his utensils and bathroom sparkling clean, and then went about his day like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Liu was supposed to be at work that day, and normally she checked in with her sister daily, but she did neither on the evening of the 15th of June 2005. This was very unlike Liu. Her sister reported her missing within 24 hours, and Leong instructed someone else at work to report her missing too. Despite this, the police did not launch a missing person search. However, they soon would, because on the 16th of June 2005, the following day after the murder, a Klang River cleaner was pulling up debris from the water. He saw a cardboard box. The cleaner was going to fish out the box in the river and place it in the trash collector without hesitation or investigation. But as he lifted the waterlogged cardboard box, it fell apart in his hands. Inside, he found a human body part. It was the severed lower torso of a woman, cut at the pelvis and knee joint. It was of course Liu. The cleaner later said that the flesh looked like fresh meat. There was no smell, no blood, and the bone was white. He quickly called the emergency services, and an investigation soon began. Singapore has always maintained a relatively low crime rate, so the police were extremely shocked and horrified to see such a gruesome case. Only minutes into the investigation, the police found another box. Inside lay a woman's severed upper torso wrapped in plastic bags and torn pages of a newspaper. The torso had the arms and hands still attached, which is truly a horrific thing to picture. Forensic examination confirmed the grim truth. The body parts belonged to the same victim. They identified the victim as Liu through her fingerprints. After the first day, the shins, feet, and head were still missing. But what was known was that the killing was not sexually motivated, as no male DNA was found within Liu. On the same day, the police headed to Liu's place of work. The police went under the guise that they were only investigating a missing persons case and not a homicide. Soon enough, they discovered the affair that Liu and Leong were having. This made him a prime suspect, and so they decided to speak to him. But when they started talking to him, Leong showed significant signs of discomfort. This raised further suspicion. He was apparently shaking and trembling his words. The police pressed him about his love affair, but Leong's responses were aggressive, defensive, and he denied all accusations. However, as the police were talking to him, they noticed that he had several cuts on his hands, but he tried to explain this away by saying that he was doing DIY at home. An inspector was assigned to the case, and his name was Roy Lim. Roy felt that his initial conversation with Leong was not long enough and decided to bring him in for a formal interview. Over the next 10 hours, Leong was questioned and interrogated. This time, the police told him that they had found body parts of her in the river. At first, he denied all of the accusations of his involvement, but under the mounting pressure, he eventually confessed. Well, kind of. His account did not fully match the reality of what had happened or the true motive behind his actions. Leong first claimed to killing Liu, but claimed it was part of a lover's pact to take their lives. He insisted that she had consented on this act. Leong claimed that when Liu came round, she requested that he leave his family and move to China with her, but he felt like it would be too difficult to start life there as he was 50 years old. Also, according to him, he couldn't bear to leave his children, and he still loved his wife. Leong claimed that Liu was overwhelmed with despair over their relationship coming to an end, and proposed a pact to end everything. According to him, she insisted on going first to prove her sincerity, thus allowing him to strangle her before he would do the same to himself. He agreed, and he insisted that he loved her. But after strangling Liu, he said the look on her face scared him, and he couldn't bear to do the same to himself. He told the police that he began to panic after killing her, so he chopped her into pieces and disposed of her remains in the river before cleaning his flat. He said he did this to hide the horror from his beloved daughter. Upon hearing this, the police didn't buy a word. They rejected his claims and charged him with first-degree murder on the 18th of June 2005, just 3 days after the killing. His fate now rested in the hands of the court. A guilty verdict meant one thing: death. Leong was arrested and awaited trial. Meanwhile, the police continued to search for Liu. A 30-member police operations team searched the river in search of Liu's missing head, feet, and legs. The search extended to the Singapore River, but there was no trace. Investigators then turned to the Tuas incineration plant. They learned that trash from the Singapore River was cleared every few days. They discovered that the pickup fell right between Louis' murder and Leong's arrest. If any remains were still intact, they could be there. After 10 hours of searching the trash heap, officers uncovered a decomposed head wrapped in newspaper and sealed in a yellow plastic bag. And then nearby, they found a pair of severed legs. The head was far too decayed to be identified visually, but a forensic expert soon confirmed that the head and legs belonged to Liu. However, despite the search party's best efforts, her feet were never found. During the autopsy, it was uncovered that numerous metal shard fragments were embedded into the muscle of her left leg. When the police searched Leong's family home, they found the cleaver and rubber mallet, and as suspected, the cleaver had noticeable chips along its blade. When the two pieces of metal were examined together, it was clear that the metal was from the same source. And not only this, they found the same newspaper, cardboard fibres, and plastic bags that were used to wrap up her body parts in his home. But the police were desperate for more evidence beyond circumstantial. When they forensically examined his bathroom, there was no shred of evidence. Leong had been very thorough with his cleanup, or so the police thought. During a final inspection of the crime scene, an investigator noticed blood on the underside of the toilet bowl. This blood was tested, and it was confirmed to belong to Liu. At the same time, the police reviewed CCTV footage of the person withdrawing money from her account. The man bore a strong resemblance to Leong, even with his attempts to disguise himself. When confronted, Leong denied any involvement. He then introduced an unexpected complication. He had an identical twin brother. This was true, which meant the police now had to determine whether his twin played a role in the crime. It also created a major obstacle. Any genetic evidence connecting Leong to the murder would be useless, since his twin would also have the same DNA. However, his brother had a solid alibi, ruling him out. Leong's attempt to shift suspicion away from himself had miserably failed. When pressed further about the stolen money, he claimed it was just a harmless prank between him and Liu, and he insisted that he had already returned the cash, but the police found no evidence to support his claim. Not a single part of his story added up. After further questioning, Leong retracted his initial statement. This time, he gave a full, honest confession. He admitted to killing Liu, not out of some pact, but out of fear. Fear that she would expose his theft. Fear that their affair would be revealed to the world. He said he felt like he needed to kill her to continue his perfect life. The trial began in May of 2006 in the High Court of Singapore. At first, the defense tried to make the earlier confessions inadmissible, claiming that he was unethically coerced, and he reverted back to his initial claim that her death was part of a lover's pact. Leong told the court, "It was the look on her face when I killed her that made me decide not to strangle myself." He aimed for a culpable homicide conviction, which carried a maximum sentence of just 10 years. This would allow him to avoid murder or a manslaughter charge. His defense team backed this up, as there was no defensive injuries found, and it seemed like Liu didn't fight back. However, the judge asked if he could demonstrate the killing with his lawyer in the same way like he did to Liu. When Leong pulled the towel around his lawyer's neck, a strange smile crossed his face, the sight of which sent a chill through the courtroom. That airy smile weighed heavily on the final decision. On the 19th of May 2006, after a 16-day trial, a verdict was reached. The court dismissed his claims and found him guilty of murder. Leong was sentenced to death. Leong made several attempts to appeal his conviction, all of which failed. With no legal options left, Leong's final hope was a plea for clemency from the President of Singapore, and on the 28th of November 2007, the President rejected his request. A death warrant was issued, scheduling for his execution just 2 days later. Up until this point, it's reported that Leong showed no signs of remorse. At dawn, on the 30th of November 2007, Leong was hanged in prison at the age of 52. The murder had a huge impact on the country. Thankfully, a funeral service reconstructed her butchered remains free of charge. Those who worked on her funeral described the case as the most heart-wrenching they have ever handled. Her coffin wasn't empty, it was filled with her favourite toys, books and clothing. Finally, Liu's coffin was covered by 260 roses and sent to the crematorium for funeral processing. On the 11th of July 2005, the funeral service was held. The event amassed a crowd of over 150 people. Her family struggled to attend, as they said that the pain was too great. Meanwhile, Leong's family were left to pick up the pieces. The man they trusted was a husband and a father, but now he was a murderer behind bars. The family were branded by his crime, and they were ostracized. They became the targets as strangers gathered outside their home shouting accusations and disturbing their peace. Some even hurled objects at them. The harassment spread, and neighbours suffered as well. With no escape, the family of the perpetrator was forced to leave, and no one wanted to buy their flat, as a murder had taken place there. They were forced to sell it back to the government for next to nothing, just to escape. This case is regarded as one of the most gruesome in Singapore's history, and is known as the Klang River Body Parts Murder.